Now take the wheel off, use a 17mm socket. Take these lug bolts off. When you go to take the last one off, just support the wheel in case it's going to fall. And take the wheel off. Now take some needle nose pliers. We're going to take this pad sensor out. Just grab the base of the sensor and just carefully pull. Trying to see it. There we go. Pulled it out. And slide this right off the bleeder screw where the cap is. You can just pop that off. And slide that pad sensor off. Now take this clip off. Just use a pry bar. You can use some pliers to get underneath here. Just grab it, slide it off. Now I'm just going to take a pry bar and just compress the caliper a little bit, just in between the rotor and the caliper, and just try to compress it so it's a little bit loose. Now we can take these slides off. Just a couple of caps over the slides right here. Just pop those off with a screwdriver. Then you can get to the caliper slide bolts. Now I'm going to use a 7mm hex socket. Take these bolts out. Take those pins out. You can grab the caliper and you should be able to slide it off. If not, you can use a pry bar. Just pry right here. Pry it out. And then take a brake caliper hanger. Take the brake caliper hanger and we'll hang that from the coil spring. Just make sure there's no tension on the brake hose. Now I can take the brake pads off. These ones are stuck on there pretty good. Just pry those off. And take this one off the caliper. There's just a clip that holds into the piston. Now use a 16mm socket, take these two bolts out. And take the bracket off. Using a 6mm hex socket, we're going to take this screw out right here, give it a couple taps. Take that out and grab the rotor. If it seems like it doesn't come off too easy, just take a hammer, give it a tap on those areas, slide it down. before we take this axle nut off, just take a chisel or a punch and just try to spread it a little bit. It's just been peened over a little. Just try to spread it back to its natural form. The same on this side. Be good. And use a 36mm 12-point socket. Take this nut off. Now we're going to take this lower strut bolt out. Use a 16mm wrench on the bolt side. On the nut side, use an 18mm socket. Take the nut off. And take that bolt out. Now I'm going to use a punch and push down the knuckle from the strut. There we go. Now using a punch, we're just going to separate the axle. Or you can take a air hammer and get it out that way. Just push it through. And just slide the axle out. We have the axle completely out of the vehicle. You don't necessarily have to do that. You just need the axle out of the hub. And we're gonna reset this back into the strut just temporarily because we're gonna remove it on the car. It's a lot easier to do that if it's a little bit more stable. So just slide this knuckle back into the strut. There is a pin in the back. You want that pin to line up. And then slide this up. Whoop. I gotta move it a little more. Now we're gonna have to pull the hub out. So I'm gonna use a tool that goes around here. And then from the back side, I'm going to use this, and this is going to pull the hub straight out as I tighten it. I'm going to take these screws out, just use a 10mm socket. That one there. There's one down here as well. Take those out. If you need to, take some of the other ones out if they're getting in your way. And the shield's just going to be loose there. that's out. Now we're going to take the snap ring off. You need some snap ring pliers. And just squeeze it. And these might work a little better. And slide that out. Now we're going to take the old bearing out. We're going to use an adapter on the inside. This is going to push the old adapter in as we tighten the screw. So you're going to have to play around with different kits to try to find the correct one. And you want something on the outside that's bigger than where the bearing's going to come out. And now we can tighten this down. Find out in a minute. I know. There we go. And there's the bearing inside there. Now we're going to install the new bearing. And you can see on the top part of the bearing, it is chamfered a little bit. So that's going to go in. Another indication is if you have a different style bearing and you see where the reluctor ring is or where the magnet pickup is going to be, you can see that that's for the ABS. That's going to go on the inside. So slide that. And then we're going to have to come up with some type of kit to press this in. Very similar to taking it out. So come up with the best you can for adapters, getting this lined up correctly. For this part, I'm just going to use the old bearing to press it in the rest of the way. Get that lined up. The reason why I don't start with the old bearing is it's a little bit clunky, a little awkward when it's first starting. So it's much easier to start at this point with it. You just have to push it in a little bit further so that we can get that snap ring in. Should be it. snap ring. Reinstall the snap ring. If the snap ring does not seat all the way in, the bearing's not all the way installed, and you got to push it in a little bit further. That's seated all the way. It's always a good idea to replace the snap ring when you're doing this job. But that's seated in all the way around. That's good. With the hub, we need to remove this race. If you have a special puller that you can do that with, you can use that. What we're going to do is just put it in a vise and air chisel it off. Just be careful if you do that. If we have to, we can heat it up as well. All right, so be careful, watch out. There's a little lip there. Oops, that's just a seal. Now we're going to install the hub. I already took the race off the hub from the old bearing. You're going to have to use some type of a press or a puller to get that off. Or if you want to do it like we did, we used a little bit of heat and we're able to slide that off. Now we can reuse this. Now on the inside, we're going to press this in very similar how we pressed in the bearing. But on the inside, we need something as small as this little part of the bearing, because you just want to push on the bearing. You don't want to be pushing on the other side or you're going to pull the whole bearing in. So we'll put that on the back side. So we'll go through on the front. Make sure that looks good. That's all the way down. I can loosen up the tool. Slide it out, it's all set. Now put this shield back on if you took that off. Get those bolts started. And snug those down. Now I'm going to separate the knuckle from the strut again, just using a punch. Just like that. Now we're going to slide it into the back of the knuckle. Twist and get that all to line up. With that started, then you want to get it lined up at the base of the strut. And there's 2 pins on there. You want to make sure those line up with the slot in the knuckle. You might have to twist it a little bit. And use either a pull jack or a screw jack underneath. And just raise up on the knuckle. And slide that up till the strut bottoms out. That's good. And take the bolt, get the bolt started. Put the nut on. And tighten that down. Now we're going to torque this nut and bolt to 74 foot-pounds. Now install the spindle nut. I'm going to take 2 of the lug studs and get those started. Then we're going to take a pry bar and just put it in between here. Oops. Just like that. That's going to prevent the hub from spinning. Now I'm going to torque this nut to 310 foot-pounds. Just be careful, it's very tight. There we go. Now I'm going to clean up the hub area. You can use a wire brush or a die grinder. Just be careful, don't take off too much material. Take a thin coat of anti-seize and just put it on the hub surface. That's good. Slide the rotor on the hub. Make sure you line that hole up with the threaded hole. And take the screw, get that started. And we'll snug that down. Not too tight, just snug. That's good. Now slide this over the brake rotor. Get the bolt started. Tighten those down. Now I'm going to torque these bolts to 81 foot-pounds. I'm going to take the caliper off the hanger. Flip it around. We're going to compress that piston. Just use a compressing tool. Just go nice and slow. And compress the piston. As you're pushing this back, fluid's going through the lines, through the hoses, back up into the master cylinder reservoir. All right, it's compressed all the way. Take the tool off. Take the brake pad, we'll slide that into the piston. This one has the bracket on it. Just like that. The other brake pad's just gonna go right here. I'll reinstall the caliper. Take the pins and just clean these off with a little brake parts cleaner. Wipe it off with a rag. Now just take the pins, just put a little caliper grease on those. Nice thin coat. And install those in the caliper. And tighten these down. And torque these down to 22 foot-pounds. And put these caps on. And there should be one that goes there as well. Now take this bracket, line this up here. You can use some pliers if you need to. And just push it back in place. It should clip in right there and just be holding right there. Now take the end of the pad sensor and we're going to slide that into the pad. And you can see where it's raised up a little bit. That's going to go towards the pad. Just slide that in. You can use needle nose pliers. With that locked in, we can go over the bleeder screw, just like that, and then put that cover over. Take the tire, line it up. Put the lug nuts on, lug bolts, get those all started. Now I'm going to torque these lug bolts to 110 foot-pounds in a cross pattern to tighten the wheel down evenly. Now just go around again, double check.